Hi everyone. Today I wanted to teach you the basics of how to play my card game called Those of Love and Death. Excuse my squeaky chair. Anyway, there are being cards, which are like creatures or monsters. There are field and support cards, which are two different types. Those are sort of like monster zones in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there are Speck of Light cards as well, which are like a resource that you occasionally get, and they allow you to play more powerful cards. You have to start with a deck of 40 cards, and your deck can only have up to 3 Speck of Light cards in it. Usually you can have 3 copies of any card in your deck, but you can only have 1 crown card in your deck. And some of the fields and supports have an unlimited icon, which means it can have any number of them in your deck. So you have your deck of 40 cards. Let's go through a little game starting scenario here. So to start the game, you secretly choose a starter field, which has this starter icon here, and is a field. You choose one of those, and you can choose another card that is an unlimited support or an unlimited field. So I will choose my supportive strength here, and you secretly choose them face down without showing them to anyone. And then you shuffle your deck, and then you draw your opening hand of 5 cards. And you also get 2 power, which is another form of currency in the game that allows you to play certain beings. The way power works is that basically the more stuff you do in the game, the less power you get. But if you are in a pinch or just deliberately holding back, your power accumulates, which allows you to play some powerful things. So I have 2 power. Whenever I play a card, the power gets drained by 1, and whenever I attack, the power gets drained by 1. So I have a tier 1 being in my hand here, the Binoculist, and after I've drawn my hand and get my power, my fields and supports flip up and go into play. And when you're playing beings, you can only play, like if you have no other beings in play, basically, you can only play a tier 0, like a tier less card, or a tier 1 being. So I'm going to play my Binoculist, she's tier 1, and you play her onto the front line, onto the starter field or onto any field, just like that. And now that I have a tier 1 being out, on my next turn, I could play another tier 1 or a tier 0 or a tier 2. So, let's say I had another field in my hand. During every turn, you can play up to 1 being, up to 1 field or support, and up to 1 speck of light. So, I haven't played a field or support yet this turn. These 2 secret ones that were put into play weren't actually played, they were just to start the game off, so I didn't play one yet. So I'm gonna just do that now. I'll play my Convergence. And I haven't played a Speck of Light yet either, so I'll play a Speck of Light now. And for each one of these cards that I play, again, this causes power to drain by 1, so I don't have any power anymore. It's very common to just run out of power. And that doesn't matter for a lot of cases. Power only matters for certain cards. So you can very easily just play the game without it, with a lot of the cards anyway. In the later set, I'm planning to have some more cards that use power as a currency, but for now, just like a handful of them do. And I can't attack for several reasons actually right now, because my being can't attack the turn it comes out, and that lasts throughout the entire game, like beings just can't attack until your next turn anyway. But I also can't attack because the way that attacking works in this game is that can only attack someone directly if they have a front line that doesn't have a being on it. And you can also attack beings that are on fields that share the same field subtype that the one that your being is on. So, for example, right now, my binoculist, she's on the castle approach, which is a field, but it also has the subtype front line, which is represented by the sword. So, if my opponent has a front line without a being on it, a front line is a special field that allows me to attack them directly if they don't have a being on it. But if they do have a being on it, I can't attack directly. So let's say that my opponent here played a castle approach of their own. That my opponent secretly chose and now puts into play their castle approach and their cloudland. Their cloudland is a sky field, so the binoculist is not on a sky field, it's on the front line, so it wouldn't be able to attack it unless they moved. So the binoculist on my turn could move onto the convergence, which is every field subtype, and then I could attack the being that my opponent has on the sky field. Now, what's the point of attacking a being if you could just attack someone directly? If people keep on putting blockers on their front line to avoid direct damage, is that just all there is to it? Not really. See, whenever a being gets destroyed, their owner has to discard cards from the top of their deck equal to their tier +1. And every turn, people have to draw 2 cards, unless it's the first turn of the game. And when you run out of cards, you lose the game. So, while you can put blockers in front of yourself to prevent direct damage, which of course, when you get to 0 life, you lose the game, it'll make your deck run out of cards most of the time. Speaking of life totals, each player starts at 100 life. And speaking of beings, each being has attack and defense points. The attack points are in red, the defense points are in green. So if a being fights another being, if the attacking being's attack points are equal to or greater than the defending being's defense points, then it'll destroy the defending being. But otherwise, just nothing will happen. It's not like a two-way combat system like in Magic, where like when you attack with a creature in Magic, they can trade, as they call it, where they both like manage to kill each other somehow. That's not how this works. It's just like just the attacker is attacking, sort of simple system there. Okay, so let's say it's my turn now. I draw a card. I draw 2 cards rather. And let's say that I get Thunderclap. Thunderclap's a really good tier 2. But I'm just using Thunderclap as a tier 2 to demonstrate what would happen here. So, my opponent right now has a being on their sky field, and I have 2 front lines, which is dangerous actually, because, again, if I have an unoccupied front line, then my opponent can attack me on their front line. It doesn't matter if I have 2 and one of them's occupied, they can just go onto the one that's unoccupied and deal direct damage. But anyway, I'm going to play Thunderclap. She is a tier 2 being. She has an enter the battlefield ability sort of thing, which is actually very powerful. And what happens when I play her is I'm going to play her onto the same field that the binoculist is on here. So I'm playing my Thunderclap onto the same field as my binoculist. Now, one of 3 things has to happen. Either I have to destroy one of them, or I have to move one of them, or I have to pair them, and then put one of them onto the support. So I'm going to pair them. So I'm going to leave the binoculist on the field, and I'm going to put my Thunderclap onto the support. When a being is supporting another being, just make sure that the support is behind the field that the being's on, just to indicate like what's supporting what. Now, when a being is being supported, the being on the support applies its little yellow numbers here. Each being, generally speaking, has yellow numbers here that increase attack and defense points when they're like supporting someone. So Thunderclap here has support of 5/5, so it would boost the Binoculist's attack and defense points by 5. And it's also on support of Strength, so the Binoculist gets boosted by an extra 3/3, which is nice. I could have had the Binoculist support Thunderclap, but it's a good idea to have Thunderclap support the Binoculist because people can only attack the Binoculist, they can't attack Thunderclap. So this is potentially going to protect Thunderclap and allow me to play another Tier 2 being or a Tier 3 being on my next turn. So another thing to mention that's very important is that when a being is on a support, their abilities are nullified. So unless it's implied or stated otherwise, the abilities just completely shut off. But Thunderclap doesn't have this issue because she actually entered play on the field. And the only ability she has is an enter the field ability. So that ability still happens, and then she just moves on to the support. But say if I had the Binoculist on the support, then I wouldn't be able to draw an extra card, which is just her ability that I can activate anytime I want, once per turn, on my turn. Anyway, now my opponent has nothing on their front line, so... Well, actually, just a moment. I'm going to move my Binoculist onto Convergence here, and have Thunderclap Follower behind. And then I'm going to have the Binoculist attack my opponent's being on the Cloudland. So my opponent would have to deck 2, and they won't have a Tier 1 anymore. So they won't be able to play any Tier 2s. I guess I should go over some more things. There are cards with blue icons sometimes. Like here, Tyrant Rose. Tyrant Rose has a blue icon, a blue earth icon. The blue icons mean that the card with the blue icon can only be played if you already control a card with the normal version of the blue icon. So I can only play Tyrant Rose if I have a field that is an earth type. And that's how blue icons work. There are also green icons. If you look at Dreamcrafter, Dreamcrafter has a being icon that's green with the number 2 next to it. So what the green icon means is you can't play that card if you already have something. It's sort of like the opposite of the blue icon. So Dreamcrafter can only be played if you do not already have 2 beings in play. That's how that works. There's also some cards like Angel of Peace. Angel of Peace has a red speck of light icon. A red icon means that you have to get rid of something that you have in game in order to play it. So you would need to willingly destroy a speck of light you control. Like I said before, specks of light are sometimes used as a currency in the game. So she's one of the cards that uses that currency. You would have to willingly destroy it. And there are also cards that deal with power. So, for example, Loyal Angel has a red 4 power icon. So in order to play her, you would have to pay the 4 power. And then after you played her, if you had any power left over, she would still drain 1. So yeah, that is how power is sometimes used, and that's what those icons mean. Another important basic rule is the details of movement. So here are the 3 ways you can move. You can either move the being to the field near it, which is just directly adjacent to. So in this situation here, I have a meadow next to a cloudland next to the castle approach, and my Binoculist is on the meadow. So I would not be able to get to the castle approach right away. I would need to move the Binoculist onto the cloudland first, and then on my next turn I could move it onto the castle approach. That said, though, you can play a being onto any field you have. Another way to move beings is, say, same situation, my Binoculist is on the meadow that's right next to the cloudland, but the cloudland has another being on it. like dark wood here, as long as dark wood would also be able to move, you can just move both of the beings by having them swap places like this. Another situation is if, like previously, the binoculist was being supported here like this, as long as both beings would be able to move, you could toggle their support roles. So instead of, for example, the binoculist being supported by Thunderclap, you would be able to move both of them for the turn and have Thunderclap now being supported by the binoculist. And again, while on a support, the being's effects are nullified unless it's implied or stated otherwise. Oh, another important thing to note is that you can't rearrange fields after they've entered play. Going back to the example here, where the binoculist is on the meadow and wants to get to the castle approach, it would need to cross the cloudland. Some people might say, well, instead of crossing the cloudland, why don't we just rearrange the fields so that the castle approach is next to the binoculist instead? But you can't do that. And on a similar note, though this doesn't happen super often, using the situation here where there's the meadow, cloudland, and castle approach all next to each other, if one of them were to be removed from play, then there would be a gap here, and that gap would immediately be filled. Say the cloudland would get removed from play, the meadow and the castle approach would then be next to each other. Oh, I almost forgot to mention that during your turn you can willingly destroy any number of beings you control, because sometimes you run out of space. That would still result in you having to discard cards from the top of your deck, though. But that is something that's just a basic rule. One or two more things. If, say, Binoculist is being supported by Thunderclap, as was the example before, and on your opponent's turn, they use one of their beings to destroy the Binoculist. If the Binoculist leaves play for any reason, the being supporting it will try to immediately get placed onto the field that the Binoculist was previously on. So, for example, if this was happening on a front line, and the Binoculist gets destroyed from an attack, and that player has another front line with a being on it, then that being would be able to then, after the Binoculist is destroyed, attack Thunderclap. Also, if that field isn't there anymore, then the being has no place to go on to, because it would try its hardest to go onto that specific field and it would be gone. So it would automatically be destroyed. And the very last thing that I have to say in this basic rule overview video is I mentioned that once you reach 0 life, you lose, which is true. But also I forgot to mention that if you gain enough life to reach 200 or more life, although it's less common, that would win you the game. Anyway, that's about it for the basics. Yeah, just to let you guys know, these cards are available on the Game Crafter, and I'll put a link in the description there. And I just have fun drawing this card game and playing this card game with friends and stuff. I don't design this card game with any rarities or anything. I try to design it so that all of the cards are worth playing. Like, some cards are better than others, but I don't intentionally design cards to be better than others. You know what I mean? Like, they're all supposed to be fairly competitive. So I hope that you like that, because it bothers me sometimes how in a lot of card games there'll be commons and rares and stuff, and it's like, well, everyone's just gonna get the rares. Who cares about the commons? Usually the commons kind of suck, you know? So I tried to design all the cards significantly so that they could be played in real decks, not just be placeholders. And yeah, I just have fun playing this game. If I didn't have fun playing this game, I wouldn't be making the cards, so You can go ahead and pick up some cards in the link in the description. And let me know if you want to see any battle videos or anything. I hope this kind of video format is okay. I'm trying to do like a less uptight, less scripted sort of video. And I hope you understand how to play. If you have any questions about specifics, this was just like a general overview video. And I have a rule book, which I will link to in the description as well, that goes into stuff more specifically.